This is section 2.2, Truth Tables, part 2. If you did not watch part 1, please go back and do so because I discussed how to come up with the results of the truth table for the and, which is the conjunction, the or, disjunction, and we talk about negation. So in this problem, we're putting pieces together. Find the truth value for the compound statement. Suppose P is true and Q is false. Now, for this type of question, we do not need to make a truth table because we know that P is true, and we also know that Q is false. So this is merely just plugging things in and seeing what the result is. So if I see P, I'm going to plug in true. I'm going to keep the and symbol, keep the negation, and wherever I see Q, I'm going to plug in false. Now the order of operations tells me I have to do negation first. So the negation of false is true. So now I'm down to true and true. So if you remember from the truth table that and is only true when both P and Q are true. So I'm looking here. I have true and true. The result of that is true. Okay, so let's do this other one. I have negation. I see a Q, I'm going to plug in false. I have the or sign. I see a P, I'm plugging in true. And in the order of operations, it told us to work inside the parentheses first. So I have to do false or true. Now remember for or, the only time or is false is when both P and Q are false, otherwise it's true. Since I have false or true, that is true inside the parentheses. Now I have negation. Negation of true is false. So the result of this will be false. So what if you want to know all the possible truth values for negation of P or Q? You would need to construct a truth table. That would give me all possibilities. Okay, so how do we create a truth table? Notice the directions are different. I don't know what P is, I don't know what Q is, so I need to list out all possible possibilities or outcomes for the results, okay? So when this happens, I'm going to have a column for P, a column for Q, and then I have to build out my truth table, okay? So in order to build it out, I have to follow the order of operations. It's said to do inside parentheses first. So this next column is going to be Q or P. So I did parentheses first, and then I work my way outwards, which I have a negation. So negation of Q or P will be my absolute last column. Now to determine how many rows I have, since I have only two letters P and Q, and both of those have two possibilities of being either true or false, then that means I have 2 to the second power, meaning I have two items I'm looking at and two possibilities. So 2 to the second power is 2 times 2, which is 4 columns. So by the way, when you just have just P and Q, you have 4 columns always. Okay, so we're going to have 4 columns here. So there's my truth table. Okay, now I just have to fill it in. I'm going to try to clean this up a little bit, which wasn't too successful with the eraser there, but okay. So when this happens and you have to make your own, the P column is going to be true, true, false, false, always, okay? So 2 trues, 2 falses. The Q column is going to be true, false, always. It doesn't change. So again, P is true, true, false, false, and Q is alternating true, false, okay? That gives me all possibilities. So let's look at row 1. P is true, Q is true. So now I'm going to write stuff in. So I see Q or P. So Q is true in row 1, or P is true. True or true results in true. So now you have a choice. You can either finish this off completely or go down the column, which I'm going to go down the column. So I'm going to do Q is actually false. So I'm going to write that up. Q is false, or P is true. False or true, the result of that is true. Remember, the only time or is false is when both are false, okay? All right, Q or P. So Q is true, or P is false. Again, the result is true. And finally, Q is false, or P is false. The result is false. This is the only time when or, with an or, it's false. Now I have to negate whatever I found inside the parentheses. So negation of row 1 is true. So negation of true equals false. In row 2, I negate what I got, which was true. Negation of true is false. Row 3, I negate what I just got, which was true. Negation of true is false. And in row 4, I negate what I just got, which was false. The result of that is true. So the result of that compound statement, negation of Q or P, is false, 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 true. Okay? So the result is going to be false if P and Q are true. The result is going to be false if P is true and Q is false. The result's going to be false if P is false and Q is true. And finally, the result will be true if both P and Q are false. And how did I know that? I looked at the first two columns. I looked at the rows and determined what the outcome was. So now I know the outcomes if I know if the original statements are true or false. Okay, so by the way, what I just highlighted is the resulting answer. On the test, you will need to show the entire truth table and the results. So please do them like I showed you in this video. Let's move on. Create a truth table for the statements, negation of P and negation Q. So again, I have two letters, P and Q. That lets me know that I'm going to have 4 rows. Okay, so according to what we did last time, we have to do inside parentheses. Inside the parentheses, I see negation. I have to handle that first. So I'm going to do a negation Q. Then I'm going to do the parentheses P and negation Q. Okay, these are order of operations. Finally, I'm going to negate that. So my last column is going to be the entire thing, negation parentheses P and negation Q. Okay, so again, I have 4 rows. If you have lined paper, this part goes a little bit faster. Okay. All right. So with the P column, remember it's going to be true, true, false, false, always. And then Q is going to be true, false, true, false. Okay. Now I'm negating Q. So negation of true equals false. I'm looking at the Q column, so negation of false equals true. The negation of true equals false, and the negation of false equals true. Again, I'm looking at this Q column, and I'm negating it. That's how I got those values. Okay, so now I have to put those pieces together. So I have P, which is true, and I'm looking at row 1. Its negation Q, I found that to be false. So true and false equals false because the only time and is true is when both are true. Okay, let's do the next one. P is in row 2. P is true and negation of Q is true. True and true is true because that's the only time and is true, is when both are true. In row 3, P, which is false, and negation Q, which is also false. False and false is false. And in row 4, P is false and negation of Q is true. False and true is false. Again with and, the only time it's true is when both P and Q are true. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the negation of what we just found. So in row 1, I'm going to negate false. The negation of false is true. In row 2, I'm going to negate true. The negation of true is false. In row 3, I'm going to negate false. The negation of false is true. And in row 4, I got false, so the negation of false is true. So what does this mean? That means when P, I'm looking at row 1, when P and Q are true, with this particular circumstance, the result of this compound statement is going to be true. In row 2, when P is true and Q is false, the result of that is going to be false. When P is false and Q is true in row 3, the result is going to be true. And finally, when both P and Q are false, the result is true. All right. So it says create a truth table for the statements negation W and negation N. So it's negation W or negation N. Now again, we have just 2 letters, so we know we're going to have 4 rows. When this happens, it's not P and Q, just go in order. So I'm going to do W first, and then I'm going to do N. And then I don't have parentheses, so I'm going to go in order. So I'm going to do negation W, because negation goes next after parentheses. I'm going to do negation N, because I need to take care of those negations. And finally, I'm going to put the pieces together. So it's going to be negation W or negation N. Okay, so that's how I set it up. Again, I have 2 letters, so I have 4 rows. So if you have 2 letters, always 4 rows. Okay? Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. All right, so W, it's going to be true, true, false, false, always. N is true, false, true, false. My dog's saying hi to you. I don't know if you can hear that or not. Now I'm going to negate the W column. So negation of true equals false. The negation of true equals false. The negation of false equals true. And the negation of false equals true. Okay? Now I'm looking at the N column. Negation of true equals false. Negation of false equals true. Negation of true equals false. And negation of false equals true. Now I have to put together the pieces. So I'm going to just show you that I'm using this information. Okay? So what I'm going to do is negation W for row 1 was false, or negation of N is false. False or false yields false. Okay? Negation of W in row 2 is false, or negation of N in row 2 is true. False or true is true. Remember with true, or, an or is true unless both are false. So that's why number 2 is true. So let's look at row 3. We have true, or negation of N, which is false. It's true. And finally, the last row, row 4, negation of W we found to be true, or negation of N is true. True or true is true. So this is the result of my truth table. So what does that mean? That means when W and N are both true, the result is false. When W is true and N is false, the result is true. And when W is true, when W, I'm looking at row 3. I said that wrong. When W is false and N is true, the result is true. And finally, in row 4, when W is false and N is false, then the result is true. Okay, so we're going to stop the video there. We're going to pick up with part 3. So this is 2.3, part 3. Thanks for watching, and enjoy the next video.